here? Wow.
So I believe we're only waiting for Christina. Christina, I hope she didn't leave. Anyhow, I think I'm just going to start by introducing our wonderful group of artists. This is Jonathan Payne, Katie Brooke, who directed Jonathan's play, Kate Benson, Lisa Evans, I think she already left, who directed Kate's play. Then we have Tiny Little Ben, Jerry Lieblich, and Stephanie Abel Horowitz, exactly, Ben Williams, and Christina Marciati. So wonderful. There was all 4 presentations were really wonderful. So I really, kudos to all of you. I would like to start with a question. So would love to ask all of you to talk a little bit about the evolution of your pieces.
I guess I'm closest. My day job is social work, and that was never my trajectory. And I think on my job I was introduced to a specific type of community that doesn't get the attention they usually, their stories aren't told as much. And I think what was exciting to me was I was introduced to this sort of different idea of what a love is, that it's wider than I imagined, because me and the staff, we seem to sort of laugh at the strange relationships that happened, because I worked in housing, I should say. I worked in housing, and it was a tight community there, and the strangest relationships came about, and we sort of laughed at how these weird couples that were coming about. And so being on that job, I was exposed to a sort of wider idea of what a relationship can be. And I think that's where the play began to percolate for me.
I was in my last semester at Brooklyn College, and I had a kind of monkish experience at Brooklyn College, and so I found myself just kind of wondering what romance was for, and also being really irritated at the women's roles in Judd Apatow movies, for instance, which are completely entertaining, but the women are dull. And I heard about a reading of this screenplay of American Pie, in which all the genders were reversed, and the men were complaining that their roles were very boring. And I thought, yes, it's time for me to write a love story, because I don't believe in love, and I'm tired of the usual progress of it, and then I couldn't start it any other way but with a discussion about making sausage. So it developed into this bar play about food and sex and why we go to bars and what we want out of our urban environments and where we look for pleasure and what happens when we find pleasure, and is it all good? And, no.
Our thing came out of a while ago. Steph had gotten really into reading biographies of like tech startup people, like Steve Jobs, and there's a book about Twitter, and
You're doing great.
Oh, thank you. And it just got us kind of talking about the idea of success as it exists in our culture right now, and it kind of got us thinking, about life and stuff. And also it got us thinking about mythology and kind of the way that like success stories are sort of the type of mythology that we have in present day, and that they give kind of these models for what a good life looks like. And so our process, we do kind of a lot of experimentation with actors and a lot of playing around. We try to find a feeling that feels central to what we're talking about. So in this case, we were looking at kind of the idea of specialness, or like if somebody seems like they have that kind of very special something, or removing that, which is really related to success and failure. We kind of do all these experiments around creating this feeling in a theatrical context, and then kind of based on all that and lots of discussions, I'll go and write something in response. And this piece is kind of smack in the middle of the play. And it's, I think, something that we've talked about a lot is that to succeed is, in a way, like to have the metric of success and failure means that there's some kind of image of what it is that you're trying to succeed at. Because if there's an image, then you could fail to achieve it. But there's kind of always this push and pull of like, well, one way to not feel like a failure is to abandon the image. But you know, the person that we see is kind of stuck in this thing of like, oh, it's just that I need a better image. So I don't know, we're trying to figure out something about what it is to be a person in that kind of construction.
You did great.
Thank you.
This is our partnership.
So I was riding the train home with Ben Williams after a show last year, and he was just talking about his experience as a shoe salesman, and he just made this statement: women in hats they never buy. And I was just sort of taken with like just the grossness of sales, you know, and how it exploits the vulnerabilities on both sides, and just this image of a luxury shoe store as a manufactured image, trying to be something it isn't, making you want something you don't. And then the parallels with this young combat vet who's like trying to convince you he's someone he's not, with his life is riddled with false narratives. So those two things together sort of sparked the project.
And how about the directors? How did you get involved with the project?
Well, Jonathan had the opportunity to workshop this at Playpen this year, and so I was brought on to direct it there, and it was a fascinating process, and so we've continued to work on it a little bit. It's I think the main interest for me in this is this the issue of displacement. I'm really interested in that, and that Jonathan is, and so you just saw the very beginning of it, but that ticking is in there. Jonathan's written it in, but we've actually put it in because this is sort of a countdown to them being pushed out of their homes, and so that context is really fascinating to me, and it's also just a really juicy play to work on. It's like a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, like someone said the other day. So it's been really fun to work with actors on it.
Leah's here.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, Kate and I have been working on Porto for like a year. It's our second project together. Yeah, I've just been talking a lot about that food and pleasure stuff. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
And it will go up at the Bushwick Star, right?
Yeah, it's going up in January. Yeah.
We're a company, so I was there at the inception. I was the inception. So I've been with it the whole time, and now that he's written it, we're trying to make it. And it will go up at Abrams, I'll plug us, in February.
We're also at Abrams.
Woo!
And as you heard, I was there at the train station talking about the old job, selling shoes. Yeah.
Now, when we put the festival together, we knew the motto was failure, but the artists that we choose in the project that we choose, we did not look for, that was not, an open umbrella that, any of these projects should fit in. Now, having seen all of the presentations today, it weaves through in some way, right? It's like, not necessarily failure all the time, but expectations and, what do you live up to, expectations other people have on you. So what is your, did you think about this? Was there like something, what's your relationship to failure?
I guess as a human being, I have a lot of relationship to failure, but, and a playwright. But I think specifically, yes, the play is centered around institutional failure. And specifically on the job I work, a lot of the people I had worked with are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and the stories I hear are all directly related to some sort of institutional failure, family failure, relationship failure. So it was interesting to explore these stories in that way.
There's something that happens like very soon after you stopped watching today in this play, which is sort of the heart of the play, which is they start talking about this baby that they had, and the baby died probably because they killed the baby accidentally in some way, and so that sort of parenting failure, but as an institutional failure, like that these people failed, sure, but that they were also failed, and that's like a really deep part of this play, and it's the thing you start to see at the beginning, but it sort of doesn't really unfold until a bit later in the play.
Yeah, I suppose maybe every, well, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say every play is about failure, but I don't think that it is. But I think we fail to remember where our luxuries come from in the moment that we consume them, I think, because otherwise, how could we? You know, I am a barbarian. I have eaten a live sea urchin, and it was alive, and then I put it in my mouth, and I killed it with my teeth, and it was delicious. And I can't really understand, I fail to understand my own human animal in that way. I can know that something is bad for me. I can know that something is terrible for the world. I can understand that restaurant that I really like is partly responsible for the displacement of people who used to have a community and affordable rent. I can understand that the animal was probably tormented, if not fully tortured, in its preparation on its way to my plate. And yet I still, sit there and say, oh, I'm gonna get a steak tonight, and so our failure to, I suppose, live up to our own ideas about what our values are supposed to be, and our failure to understand ourselves as animals, and our failure to incorporate some kind of rational care for each other into the systems of the societies we make is a puzzle to me that it sort of makes me feel like I have the brain of a very, very small insect, or at least the memory of a very, very small insect. So that.
How do you follow that? Well, we started work on the show when I was 29 and I was headed to 30. And I was really having a moment of like, what have I done with my life? Or what am I doing with my life? Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? And so I think in some ways our show started from the point of possible failure, or like even like, can failure exist if you don't want it, if you don't want the version of success? So yeah, and that feels like super at the core of our show, is the dichotomy between failure and success, and how you take on those two things, or whether you have to take on those two things, and sort of how to move forward when faced with the severity of those two things.
Yeah, and I mean, our central character, Dennis, is failed by every system that's supposed to be in place to help him. He spends the play trying to stop failing himself and his choices.
And it's also, the play is very much about the struggle between this guy and his subconscious and these kind of primal things that he can't really control. And a lot of that is also because it's a product of the Iraq War, which, boom, there you go, failure.
Well, do we have any audience questions, perhaps?
There seems to be a wonderful thread between all of your pieces. And I sense this socialization issue that we all have to deal with as men and women, as soldiers who come back, yet and people from prison who come back. And it's always this lovely nuance that they all kind of weave. Through the failure, you find success sometimes. You find it. So I guess the question is, what did you learn?
I moved home to Detroit for a year in the process of making this show. And I think in some way I learned that that there's a lot of construct, a lot of the things that we think we want or don't want or think are failures or successes. They're things we choose to buy into and we don't have to. I think that's what I learned.
Yeah, and I think going on that, it's like, yeah, that process of acculturation, it goes on with every person at every moment. And I think like realizing that that these ideas of success or what a life looks like or feels like are constructed is so helpful, and at the same time it's so scary to try to abandon that. And how do you abandon that? Knowing that like what am I if not the things that I define myself as, or the things that the culture or the world that I live in defines me as, is a scary precipice to jump off of.
So, well, thank you all for coming. At 6 p.m. is the next, we have a conversation at 6 p.m. So I hope you'll stay and come back. Thank you all for participating and for really, presenting amazing work. So we're looking forward to seeing your shows.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anshul.
Thank you.